Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hooray Online, and today I wanted to share with you everything I made in 2024. So another everything I knit video to add to your feed. In this video, I'm going to be trying on all of the garments and accessories that I knit this year in chronological order. So those are most of my garments that I knit. I knit 10 garments, 6 accessories, and a ton of ornaments. I didn't do a great job at inventorying them or cataloging them, but I would say like a ballpark figure, maybe around 100 of them, because I did a few local markets here in Toronto this year where I was selling some of my ornaments that I knit. So I would say around that many. So you could say a very productive year of knitting, but a lot of them were super small ornaments that didn't take very long to knit at all, and I had a lot of fun making them. So that was kind of a recap of this year's making for me. I'm going to be trying everything on and giving a quick recap of the process, how I felt making it, the yarn, and maybe how much I actually wore it this year, or how I feel about the garment now that I've worn it. I guess the garment or accessory now that I've worn it for a little bit. So we can just get started with the first make of 2024, which was my Candyland wrap. This was a self-drafted pattern with yarn that was gifted from Hobbii. So this accessory here, I self-drafted it. It's this really long stockinette scarf. I knit this on 3.5mm needles with Hobbii Friends Extra Fine Merino. And I used 5 different colors, or I guess 6 different colors, but I did 5 different color blocks, and I used an off-white color in between. So also I am filming this on my phone with the back camera, so if I am out of frame, that's my bad. I won't be able to fix it with editing, but I'm just gonna come up closer so you can see the details, but I hope that I'm going to be in frame for this video. So this is one of the color blocks. I just did stockinette in the round in one color, and then when I was ready to switch to the second color, I changed to doing a 1x1 color work with the white, and then I switched then to the next color and then continued on. And I just did the same thing over and over and over and over again until I finished the wrap. And yeah, I really like this wrap, but I don't love it, I would say. I find that it's not super warm. So Friends Extra Fine Merino is like a light sport, I would say, or yeah, I would say like a light sport weight yarn. And I didn't hold it with anything else, and I didn't hold it double, just single on 3.5mm needles. So it's not the warmest scarf, so I don't find that I wear it a lot outside. I made it super long though, so I'm able to wrap it around my neck around twice, and I still feel like it's a pretty good length. So I don't wear this scarf a ton for that reason. It's not super warm, and also this scarf was a mission to block. It's so long, and so when I laid out my blocking mats, it probably took up over half my apartment or most of my kitchen and living room. So I'm also just kind of scared to get this scarf dirty because I don't want to have to block it and wash it that often. So I do really like the colors. I think it's really fun, and the color work was a nice way for me to learn color work knitting. It was very easy to knit. But I find that I wear this scarf as my indoor layering scarf when I get a bit cold in my apartment. So I really like this garment, but I don't love it, but I'll continue to keep it in my wardrobe. Shortly after the Candyland wrap, I then finished my Franky Genser, which is a pattern from the Sandnes Garn Booklet 2202. And this is a top-down saddle shoulder construction. You can see it has like a pretty wide saddle shoulder here. And so I will try it on. So this is the sweater on. The pattern uses Sandnes Garn Coast, I believe, or there's 2 different gauges. One is Sandnes Garn Coast, and then the other one is, I want to say, Alpaca Bolts. I'll put all of the projects down below. So there was 2 different options, and I knit the version, the smaller gauge version on 3.5mm needles. And I really like the fit of the sweater, I would say. I really like the wider saddle shoulder that almost kind of looks like a raglan. I love the twisted rib. So this sweater features a really long twisted rib cuff. It's half twisted rib, so the inside is just a regular 1x1 rib for the sleeves, and then a pretty long twisted rib for the body, but I didn't end up knitting mine as long, and I also did a split hem. So I really like the fit of this sweater, and it was pretty easy to knit. It was very mindless and simple. The only thing is I don't really like the yarn that I used. I used Camiro's Yaku, which is a 100% merino wool in the shade Lisse Blouse. So I like it because it's kind of like a heathered blue, so I think it looks really nice in just a plain stockinette. But the yarn just continues to grow and grow every time that I block it. So the first time that I blocked this piece, I should also mention that I used this yarn for a previous sweater, the Stockholm sweater v-neck, and I held it with a mohair that I really didn't like, so I ended up frogging that, separating the mohair from this yarn, and then re-knitting it in this sweater. So I had already blocked the yarn once, and I remember that the long sleeves were an issue with my Stockholm v-neck. So then I knit this. I knit the sleeves a little bit shorter than how I wanted because I was thinking that it might grow. I then blocked the piece, and the sleeves were so long past my fingertips when I wore it, and so I then went into each sleeve, and then I cut into the stockinette, and then I unraveled some of it so it was a little bit shorter, maybe around 3 centimeters shorter, and then I grafted it together again in Kitchener stitch. I'd say I didn't do the best job with it. Like you can see here, that's where the beginning and end of my Kitchener stitches, so you can kind of see it. But I'd say the stitches across are pretty even, so I did that. But then when I blocked this again earlier on this year, as I was getting ready to start wearing it again in the fall winter, the sleeves then grew longer again. And then how I just combated that is I just stretched it out and pinned it on blocking mats to increase the width, so then the length would shorten a little bit. And then this is how the sleeves look on me now. They come to mid-palm. And so I am happy with the length now, but I just don't really like how the yarn keeps growing and how unpredictable it is. So I don't know if I would use this again, at least on its own. Maybe with mohair, the mohair might help the yarn from stretching out too much. But yeah, the way it is now, it is a little bit stressful to block the garment. This was also the first Sandnes Garn pattern that I knit. I have a few Sandnes Garn pattern booklets, and I really like Sandnes Garn patterns. I think they're great inspiration, and I think that they're pretty simple and concise because they're in a printed book, but they're still easy enough to follow. And so I really like them, but I don't really like how hard it is to get them. So Sandnes Garn only offers their patterns in a printed format, and in the past you could get it as a book, so you would get several patterns, but now I think they're only offering individual pattern leaflets. And in order to get the pattern book or the leaflet, you need to purchase Sandnes Garn yarn, which I thought was okay when it was just a book because you were getting a decent number of patterns. But now, since it's only offered individually, I think it can be a little bit costly because a lot of the time I knit from stash, so I'm not going to be using the suggested yarn to knit the pattern. And now you have to get that in order to also get the pattern. So I don't really like that, but I can understand why they're doing it, I guess, from a business perspective. It just means that I probably won't be knitting from that many Sandnes Garn patterns in the future, though I really liked the Cornelia cardigan, which came out this past fall. I really like that pattern, but I don't think I'll ever be able to knit it because I don't know if I'm going to get a whole cardigan quantity in order to knit just that one pattern, because then it ends up being over $100 with shipping, and I don't even know, maybe even, yeah, $150 with shipping. So I probably won't in the future. There's still great inspiration, but I'm happy that I do have this pattern booklet from 2022, and I'm really happy with it. I wear this sweater a lot. I just get a little bit scared when I'm blocking it. Then after the Franky Genser, I then knit another sweater. It was the Cognac sweater, which was a test knit that I did for Atelier Castin. So this sweater I knit with a strand of fingering and mohair, so Cascade Heritage and Filcolana Tilia on 6mm needles, so a pretty loose gauge, and I'll just try it on now. So this is the sweater on. This is exactly how I like to wear mine. I usually wear a white tank top underneath because I would say that the sweater is a looser gauge, which is kind of sheer but not fully see-through, so I don't always have to wear a layer underneath, but I do like it because it is a little bit warmer to do that. So this is a top-down contiguous set-in sleeve construction, and I really like the fit of the sweater. It has a really nice shoulder here, shoulder seam. It's pretty fitted to where my shoulder is, which I really like. And I really like the neckline here. I think it's a really nice rounded neckline with short rows. And I also, there's two options in the pattern. There's either twisted rib or I-cord, and I did I-cord bind off for all of the hems, which I think is just really nice and simple, and I think it looks better on a larger needle size as well. So I'm really happy with it. This is the front of the sweater, and then this is the back contiguous sit-in sleeve here. So I do really like it. I was surprised that I actually liked the looser gauge as much as I do, because the looser gauge lets me wear this garment year round pretty comfortably because it is looser, it's more breathable. I find that I can wear it over skirts and dresses pretty comfortably in the summertime, and it's still warm enough to wear even now in the wintertime on top of another layer. I also think that this gauge looks really nice with an extra fluffy mohair. So Filco Atelier, I mentioned in my 2024 knitting wrapped, is a mohair that I used this year that I really liked. It's really fluffy, so it fills in the gaps pretty well. And also the core of Filco Atelier just has this really nice shine to it, the silk core. And so I think it looks really nice in this finished gauge. I will say though that this looser gauge is a little bit more fragile, I guess you could say, because I'm noticing now that the stitches, because they're a little bit loose, they do tend to get caught onto things. So for example, when I was pulling out this sweater today, it got caught on one of my skirts that has a little hook and eye clasp. It got caught onto the hook, and as I pulled it, some of the stitches ended up bunching together, and it was a loose stitch that I just had to fix. I'll insert a little picture here, but that has happened. It's gotten caught on the corner of my standing desk at work when I stand up, and so along here the stitches came loose. So I think because of the looser stitches, it can get caught onto things and it can pull. It doesn't ruin the sweater, you can just fix it, but you just have to readjust the stitches. So that's one thing that I'm noticing about this looser gauge. And then the other thing about this sweater that, although I do love it, one thing that I would change is I find that the underarm here is a little bit deeper and the sleeves here are a little bit looser than I would like. So if I were to knit this again, I knit the size 3 if I didn't mention. And so if I were to knit this again, I think I would knit either the size 1 or 2 for the yoke of the sweater here as you're working the contiguous set-in sleeve, and then maybe just cast on a few more stitches here so it's not so deep at the underarm, and then maybe work a few more decreases so the sleeve is a little bit more fitted as it tapers down. So that's the one thing that I would change about this garment if I were to knit it again, but otherwise it's a really great basic in my wardrobe and one of my favorites from 2024. And the next garment that I knit was another sweater. It's the sweater number 14 v-neck by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I knit this with Lion Brand woolies in the shade linen and Drops Kid Silk in the shade light beige. And I don't really love this sweater, and I'll get into those reasons in the next few minutes, but I'll try it on now to show you. So this is the sweater here. I knit between a size 1 and 2 on 5.5 millimeter needles. So for the back and then the front panels here, I cast on the size 1, but then as I was finishing the front and the back panels here, I ended up doing some increases. Maybe kind of hard to tell because they kind of blend in now to the stitches I picked up for the sleeve, but I worked some increases here so the body circumference would correspond to a size 2 because I wanted this to be really oversized. And I guess looking back, I don't really know why I cast on the v-neck. I think it was because I knit the sweater number 14 initially a few years ago, and I really liked how that fit, but I didn't really like the yarn choice. It was a very variegated rainbow yarn, and so I didn't really like that, and so I thought I would knit a second version, but I would try out the v-neck. But I kind of wish that I just did the original sweater number 14 because I find that it's really hard to wear a v-neck sweater, or I just don't really like how it looks, and especially on this heavier gauge. So I used a worsted weight yarn with mohair. Maybe it would be different if I used the suggested yarn, which I think is 3 strands of mohair. It'd be a little different, but it's just very bulky. Like you can see it, the fabric just doesn't drape that nicely on the sleeve, and it's very heavy, and so to me it just looks very casual, not frumpy, but like casual, I guess. And so I kind of struggle to wear this sweater. I don't really reach for it. find the v-neck is harder to style, and also if I don't wear a higher layer like this underneath, it's just, I don't really like the neckline. I get very cold. So I don't really wear this sweater that much. I don't really reach for it because I have another v-neck sweater that I'll mention that I knit later on this year that I end up reaching for a little bit more. So I don't really know exactly what to do with this sweater. It is really warm and it's a very nice lounging sweater, but I have other sweaters for that in my wardrobe, so I find that I don't wear this sweater as much. My next finished object was a pair of socks, my first ever pair of socks, because my goal in 2024 was to try to knit my first pair of socks and see if I wanted to be a sock knitter. And I don't really know if I am, but I specifically chose this pattern because it's knit on worsted weight on 4mm needles, so I knew that it would go pretty quickly, and it has this all over 2x2 rib stitch, at least on the leg of the foot, and then at the top of the foot here, and then it's just stocking at the bottom of the foot. But I figured that that would help with sizing. If my sizing was a little bit off, the rib would be a little bit more forgiving. So I chose this pattern. I think it's a great first sock pattern, and I used Wool of the Andes worsted weight in the shade Haze Heather, and that is a 100% Peruvian Highland wool. So maybe not the best choice for socks, but I thought I would just wear these as house socks, just wear them inside with, and not wear them outside with any shoes. So I wasn't too worried about the yarn I guess wearing down, but I don't even wear them around my home because they just don't fit very well. I initially thought it was the heel construction. So this is a heel flap and gusset, and I thought that maybe the heel flap and gusset just didn't fit my foot very well because I found that the sock was always sliding up, like there would always be a lot of fabric bunching right underneath my heel. And so I thought that maybe it was the heel flap and gusset, but I think I just didn't knit the foot of the sock long enough. So I just need to go back and undo the Kitchener stitch and undo the decreases here. And then just add a little bit more length to the foot with the leftover Wool of the Andes that I have, and then just redo that toe. I also did an anatomical heel here because I figured that just based off of my foot shape, that would fit my foot better. And I think it does, so I would redo that, but that was a modification, the one modification that I did to this pattern because it was my first pair of socks. So I'd probably redo that again. I just need to go back and add some length to the foot because I just don't really wear these at all. And I think that they would be really nice to wear as some cozy socks around the home, so something that I'll try to do in 2025. And then my next finished object was another accessory. It is the Sharpei beanie, which is a pattern by Creadia Studio. This pattern is in the 52 Weeks of Accessories book, but I have the single pattern because I was part of the secret test knit. So I knit that initial test knit last year in 2023, or last 2 years ago in 2023. And then I knit a second one in 2024 because I really liked how that first one fit, but I did some modifications to the beanie. So I ended up knitting the brim in a boucle yarn, and I didn't do the plisé stitch. I just knit the brim of the hat to be as thick as the brim of the hat is in the pattern, and just in stockinette. And then I switched to cozy wool merino, loops and threads cozy wool merino, and then a strand of mohair. And it was a great way for me to use up scraps from previous projects. But I don't have the hat anymore because I actually sold it at one of my markets. I don't wear it because it's too small. I think I knit it too tight, or maybe the boucle just didn't grow as much in blocking as I would have hoped that it would. So it was a little bit too tight around my head, so I found that it was always kind of sliding off my head, especially because the body of the hat, or the main part of the hat here, it's a shorter brim, so it always just kept sliding up above my ears. And so with my markets, one of them was a 2-day market and my booth was looking pretty empty, so I ended up bringing a few knit pieces that I've knit in the past that I just don't really wear. Like I brought a few hats and some mittens, and that hat ended up selling, so I don't have the hat anymore, but I'll insert some pictures here. So overall, I really like the fit of the Sharpei beanie. I like the look of a shorter body of the hat, but a really thick brim. I just really like that look on me. It also keeps you really warm. So I absolutely love this pattern, and I would knit it again, but I would use non-Booklet yarn for the brim. I probably wouldn't do that modification in the future, or I'd size up maybe or cast on some more stitches. But overall, a really nice beanie pattern. That one just didn't fit me very well. Moving on, my next finished object was the Blouse #1 Light by My Favorite Things Knitwear. One of my favorite makes from this year. I mentioned it in my 2024 Knitting Wrapped. So this blouse, or that's the back, because there's a few short rows in it, so you can see that the front is a little bit lower than the back. But I knit this with Knit Picks Aloft in the shade Koi, and I knit this on 6mm needles. So the pattern calls for 2 strands of mohair on 6mm needles, but I wanted a very sheer looking blouse because I wanted the look of the Aura top, but I didn't want to knit it bottom up and seamed. So I chose the Blouse #1 Light, which is a top down saddle shoulder. You can see that the saddle shoulder here is a pretty narrow saddle shoulder, so it's only 2 stitches. And then I think because I used 1 strand of mohair, there's some pretty big gaps on the side here, but with this color and the fact that the whole blouse is very sheer, I feel like you don't even notice that. So this is the blouse here. I've actually never worn it this way, so I will see in editing if I like how it's styled with a white tank underneath. I usually wear it with a matching bikini top that I got. I specifically went to try and get a bralette top that would be the same color as this orange, so I could wear it underneath, and the only piece that I could find that was bright enough was this bikini swimsuit top. So I wear that a lot with like black high-waisted pants or skirts, and that's how I normally wear this as like a going out top. It's definitely not an everyday piece, but I'll see how I like it with this tank. I am really happy with how it turned out. I love the color. I love using Knit Picks Aloft as well. It's a very soft mohair. They ended up releasing more shades of Aloft earlier on this year and discontinuing some. So this Koi shade is no longer available, and I'm hoping that the yarn hasn't really changed, but it is one of my favorite mohairs to work with, and it is pretty affordable. So I would highly recommend. There's no itch factor as well when I'm wearing this blouse next to skin. And I really like the color. The only thing is, it's kind of a similar problem to my Cognac sweater. You can kind of see it now, but I think that the increases here, the saddle shoulder increases here just fall a little bit too deep. So there is a pretty big gap here to where my underarm actually is. And that is because I also sized up. So I knit the size medium because I wanted this blouse to have a little bit more positive ease than what is suggested in the pattern. So I knit the size medium, but then I think because of that, there's just a little bit more fabric here. There's some more increases here to account for a larger bust. So if I were to knit this blouse again, I think I would knit a size extra small or a small, and then maybe cast on a few more stitches in the underarm here so the body is a little bit wider, but the saddle shoulder increases here don't go as deep. But I feel like you only really notice that when I lift up my arms like this, and you kind of see how deep that increase goes, but not really a big deal. It's just if I were to knit this again. I also love the boat neckline here. You kind of need to cast on a little bit loosely, otherwise it may be kind of hard to get this blouse over your head because it's a long tail cast on, and so there's no stretch at all. And you don't want it to be too tight where it's kind of choking you as well, so you have to cast on loosely. But I do really like the look of the boat neckline here. And then there are some short rows, so I can show you how the back looks. So that is the back here. There are a few short rows, not that many, but I think enough to create a more comfortable fit where the boat neckline is high, but it's not super high up on your neck as well, where it'd be uncomfortable. So I think overall a really nice blouse, and I love it knit in 1 strand of mohair. It's a great statement piece. So my next finished object is another sweater and my second v-neck, as I mentioned in my sweater number 14 v-neck. This is the Lakes v-neck pullover by Ozetta. So this pullover I was part of the test knit group for, so the pattern and the yarn was gifted for test knit. I used Wool Dreamer's Sayona and Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I will try on the pullover now to show you. So this is the v-neck that I reach for when I do want to wear a v-neck, which is not very often, but I do think that it's a little bit more fitted. It's more cropped as well, and I like the saddle shoulder. I think it just makes it a little bit more refined. The design is just a little bit more polished in that way. So I find that I do reach for this one, but I still have that problem where I just find it really hard to style a v-neck. and the neckline is just not that great. If I don't have another layer underneath, I get a little bit too cold. So I don't really know. I think that this year really taught me that I don't really like v-necks, so I don't know if I'll be knitting anymore in the future. If I do want a v-shaped neckline like this, I'd rather just knit a cardigan that I'll just button up the front, and I just would prefer that. So I do really like the Lakes pullover silhouette. I have my Lakes pullover that I was wearing at the beginning of this video that I absolutely love. So I do really like this silhouette, just not in the v-neck version. I did also want to touch on the yarn. So I used 2 strands of Sayona in the shade Guthrie, and then 1 strand of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. And I don't really love Sayona that much, especially on its own. I find that it's a little bit too itchy and scratchy for my liking. Holding it with a strand of mohair though really helps. It's a lot more comfortable next to skin than if I were to just knit with just the Sayona, so it's not really my preference, though I do really like the Values and the brand Wool Dreamers. I find that their yarn, especially ones that use Manchego wool, is just a little bit too itchy and scratchy for me. Because the yarn is also 50% Manchego wool and 50% cotton, I do think it's a pretty breathable fabric. So you can see that this sweater doesn't have the most drape to it, I would say, compared to merino wool. It's a little bit more stiff, and I think it's because of the cotton. And the Manchego wool, it's like a very light, lofty fabric that's very dry to knit up as well. So it doesn't have the most drape, but I think it makes it more comfortable to wear year-round as well. I don't find this very difficult to wear even in the summertime in the evenings when I want a nice layer, if I'm sitting outside or going to the park. I do find that I do reach for this v-neck, but just I find it hard to style. My next finished object was my second pair of socks. This is the Soxsploration Shadow Wrap Heel pattern by Earth Tones Girl Designs, or Denise DeSantis. So I chose this pattern because I really wanted to level up, I guess, in sock knitting and start to knit my first pair of fingering weight socks. So the yarn that I used is this unknown yarn that I bought on Facebook Marketplace a long time ago. So I didn't really know what the composition was. I just knew it kind of felt like just a very typical merino, or maybe even merino nylon blend, fingering weight yarn. It's very soft, it's very plump, and I'm pretty sure it's hand dyed, but I don't really know where it was from. I just bought it off of somebody that was destashing. So because I couldn't really confirm the fiber composition, I ended up using Lang Ya wool for the heels and the toes of this sock. And I chose this pattern because I really wanted a top-down sock that also had a different heel construction, because at the time I thought that the Sunday socks didn't fit right because it was a heel flap and gusset. So I ended up trying out this pattern because it had a shadow wrap heel, which is a type of short row heel. This is how it looks on it's a little bit strange, but this is what it looks like here. So I wanted to try out this construction, and I also don't really like how these socks fit, or mainly how they feel. Whenever I wear these socks, especially when I wear them with shoes, I just can really feel the texture of the stitch as I'm walking, and it just is a very weird and kind of uncomfortable sensation. So I don't really know if it's maybe the yarn that I used, maybe like because it's superwash, the coating of it, or maybe I just knit this sock a little bit too loose and the fabric just needs to be a little bit tighter around my foot in order to not really feel the stitches. I guess only time will tell, or knitting more socks will be able to help me understand that a little bit more. So maybe next year I'll try to knit another pair and change the stitch count. But I find that this sock here is just not that comfortable to wear, especially when I'm wearing it with shoes. This is also the project where I learned that I really like flexible double pointed needles. So I don't really like magic loop, and I find DPNs, I like DPNs, but they're not very portable, and I was really hoping that I would get into socks as a very portable project to bring around and just to always have one on the go, and they're very practical. You always need a pair of socks, really. So I did really want to get into sock knitting, and I thought that flexible double pointed needles would be a great way for me to then be able to take these socks more portably. And I do really like them. You can see though that, so the way that the flexible double pointing needles work is you're working with 3 needles at a time, and it's kind of like magic loop where you have stitches across 2 needles, but then you have a third one that you're knitting with as you're working the sock. So there should be 2, joins on your sock, and for me, they were at the sides of the sock in the middle, and I feel like even with blocking and even with me wearing it so the stitches can kind of massage themselves, you can still see the line here, kind of like a tighter seam there of where I would then change to the other needle. So it's not a huge deal, but I just need to improve my tension a little bit more with the flexible double pointing needles. But overall, I think that this was a good first sock pattern, but definitely need to improve my technique a little bit more and also just experiment with different fits next year. My next 2 pieces were summer tank tops. So I think just in the interest of time, and because I'm not wearing the right bra underneath, I usually wear these halter style tanks with a strapless bra. But yeah, just in the interest of time, I'm just gonna hold them up and then I'll insert a picture here of how it looks like when I'm wearing it, how I like, and how more properly styled. So the next top that I knit was my second pie camisole. This top here is a top-down halter neck knit with 1 strand of fingering on 2.5mm needles. So I used onling number 11, which is 90% merino, 10% cashmere, and I knit this on 2.5mm needles. And this was my travel project, so I cast on this camisole for my trip to Vietnam and Thailand. So for that trip, it was a 3-week trip, and I only had a pretty small carry-on backpack, so space was very limited. So I wanted to pick a project that didn't require a lot of yarn. So this camisole here for my size, I knit the size extra small. I only needed just over 2 balls of the onling number 11. So I brought that project and I just knit on it throughout the trip, and then I finished it when I was back home and knit the 1x1 rib on the smaller needle size. So I have a lot of nice memories attached with this piece because I knit it throughout my trip, and I really like the fit of this camisole. I've mentioned it a lot on my channel in the past, but I really like the thick rib band for the high halter neck as well as the underarms here. I think it's a really nice fit. It's very fitted, but still comfortable because it is ribbed here, so it's stretchy, and I just really like the fit of it. I crop mine a little bit more and I wear it with higher waisted jeans and skirts, so just a really nice camisole design. I really like the yarn as well. Onling number 11 has a little bit of cashmere to it, and I think that that might be why it looks really nice post blocking. So after blocking, it has this really subtle halo to it, and the stitches just blend really nicely together. So I think it could be the cashmere, but also because it's knit on such a small needle size, on 2.5 and 2mm needles, that the stitches just really blend and they're not very noticeable. It's very elegant, it's very refined, it's very professional. I feel like this tank top almost looks store-bought. It's really nice. It just takes a little bit of time on 2.5mm needles, but I really like it, and I'm thinking of knitting the May camisole, which is another camisole designed by Nabita, but just a slightly different silhouette, so something that I might knit next year, but really love this camisole. So after the pie camisole, I then knit my second camisole project this year, which is the Audrey top, a pattern by Petite Knit. This pattern is a bottom up in the round construction with a halter neckline. I really like halter necklines. This one is a little bit different. It has a thinner strap here. This is just an I-cord strap here, and then you work decreases to get that halter neckline. I knit mine with Premier Yarns Cotton Fair, which is, I think, 52% cotton, 48% acrylic. It's like a very specific composition percentage, but that is a sport weight yarn, and I also modified the pattern so I could do Judy's Magic cast on, and so I could knit the neckline bottom up so I could get those decreases and work according to pattern, but then I was able to have a provisional cast on at the bottom, so then I could just add those stitches back onto my needle and then knit the body of the top top down, so I could adjust the length as I wanted to, and also I could use up as much yarn as I could. So I did that one modification, and then I also modified the finishing for the top. So for the front here, I really wanted to do a folded picot hem, and I really like how it looks. It's very cute, it's very dainty, but the picot edge just folds a little bit forward, or it lays a little bit more forward. So I don't really know how to get it to straighten out. I've tried to block it where I totally fold it the other way and then just lay it to dry, and it still will just naturally want to lean outwards like this. So I find that I don't really wear it because I don't really like how that folded picot hem lays, but I do think that it was a nice attempt at a modification that I would have enjoyed. I just need to figure out how to get that to lay a little bit more flat. So I did that folded picot hem for the front. And then I have some details in previous podcast episodes of how I did it, because I ended up unplying the Premier Cotton Fair, so it's a thinner fabric since it's folded down. So if you want more information on how I did it, I have a podcast episode where I share, and also my Ravelry project notes. So I did that folded picot hem for the front, but just based off of how I was folding and because it's not very stretchy, I decided for the back hem I would just do a 1x1 rib, a few rounds of that, and then a tubular cast off. And then I did the same thing for the bottom as well. I did 1x1 rib. I think in the pattern you just bind off and knit stitch, but I just knew based off of the composition of this yarn that it wasn't going to lay very flat, so I did the 1x1 rib, and I'm really happy with it. I don't think it takes away from the picot hem. It's not that distracting, and it just lays a little bit better. So overall, I really like this halter top, but I think if I were to get the picot hem to lay a little bit better, I'd wear it a lot more, but because I can't, or I haven't figured that out yet, I just don't wear this top a ton. Then after the Audrey top, I then knit this vest here, or I then finished this vest here because I started it several months before. This is the My Honey vest by Wool & Beyond, and it's a top-down 2-color honeycomb brioche vest that has the brioche all the way around, but then you also work a horizontal back panel here, and then you work double folded hems for all of the hems of the vest, so along the front here, along the armholes, and then along the front as well. And then you also have 2 double knit ties here at the front that you work separately, and then you seam them onto the vest. So I will try this on, and I actually don't undo the ties to wear this vest. I keep them like this because I like the proportions, and then I just put it on, slip it on over top. So I will try this on. So not sure how this is looking with the tank top underneath, but again, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna try it on over this tank that I'm wearing for the rest of this video. But we'll see if I like it. So this top, or this vest, I am really happy with the finished product, but not that happy with the process of knitting it. So this all kind of stemmed from the gauge. So I was off gauge knitting this vest. You are supposed to knit the honeycomb brioche in 3mm needles, but I had to size up to 3.5mm needles, and I still wasn't achieving gauge. It still wasn't big enough, the stitches, but I just didn't want to size up even more to a 4mm needle because I like the look of the brioche in a tighter stitch like this, or a tighter gauge. So I ended up knitting with 3.5mm needles. I sized up to a size medium in the bust circumference. So then I started off doing that, size medium, but then as I was trying it on, I realized that the vest was just going to be really tight, and so I ended up needing to frog back the back part of the brioche. I had to redo the 2 fronts as well, which was really hard because the yarn that I used was Istex Plötulopi, which is an unspun Icelandic wool for the main color of the brioche, and then underneath I used Artfil Americana DK in the shade Copper. So this kind of rose gold coppery shade. And then for the hems I used Momonoki Fin Wool, which is a hand-dyed yarn in the shade Milk Tea. It's hand-dyed, but it's almost like one color. It's not really even tonal, I would say. It's just a solid color. So The reason why it was really hard was because Soxsploration is an unspun yarn, so trying to delicately unravel the yarn was really difficult because I only had one plate of the Plotolopi, so I didn't have a lot of room for experimentation, so I really needed to unravel it very carefully so it wouldn't all come unplied. And I ended up needing to redo it. So this is the fit of the vest here after working several more increases for both the front and the back. I think in total I have maybe 25 to 30 more stitches than required to get this fit, which I still think is more fitted than what I was hoping for and what I was going for, but I was not willing to do this for a third time. So this is kind of the fit of the vest. It has a pretty fitted shoulder up at the top, and then I was kind of hoping that the body of the vest would just be a little bit wider. But then this is the back panel here, and then the two double knit ties here at the front. And I am really happy with the product. I was supposed to gift this, or I intended to gift this to my friend Kira as a graduation gift, because I posted this vest on my story and she absolutely loved the vest. And so I thought it would be kind of nice if I finished this vest. This was supposed to be the vest that I wore to Knit City, but I didn't end up going to Knit City because I ended up going to Vietnam and Thailand. So I wanted to finish this vest for Knit City and then wear it to Knit City because it's such a cool knit in my opinion. So I wanted to wear it for Knit City, and then after that it would be in May, so then I would gift it to my friend Kira who was graduating. But I just went through first off, it took me way too long to finish this vest. I finished this in August. B, I just went through a lot of trial and error that I was very attached to this vest, so I didn't want to give it away. And C, this vest is still pretty fragile, delicate even now. I know that people say that when they use Soxsploration, once it's knit up in a fabric, it's a lot stronger of a fabric. Like, it's not going to pull apart like it does when it's just on the plate. But even this, I think maybe because it's a 3D stitch texture and it's brioche, the first time that I wore this vest, I don't really know what happened. I think maybe the brioche got caught onto something and pulled, but one of the brioche stitches actually came undone and I was freaking out. So I ended up being able to temporarily repair it by sewing in a little bit more Plotolopi and then securing it at the back with some more of the Artful Americana DK. So I fixed it. I don't even know where, I think it was like somewhere along here at the back. And so I was also just scared to gift this to her. She lives across the country, and so if that were to ever happen, the vest would just be ruined because it would unravel and I wouldn't be able to fix it for her. So I ended up keeping this for myself, and I think I will keep this for myself. And so I won't be giving it away, and I'm really happy with how it turns out. I won't be knitting a second one for her though, because it was just a little bit too difficult. And I don't really enjoy it, but I think if I were to knit another one, I would do the Lonely Leftovers vest, which is a garter stitch, and then maybe just change the tie. So instead of it being a one tie here that's knit in I-cord, I would do the thicker double knit ties and then do two of them. So it's a similar look for her. Something I will consider in the future, but not too sure if I will ever knit another vest like this again. I'm really happy that I have this one though. It's a really cool statement piece. Then after this vest, I knit the Cumulus tee, but I knit the tee so it would have long sleeves like this. So this is another pattern by Petite knit. It's top-down raglan construction knit on 3mm needles and a fingering weight strand of yarn. So I used Illimani Sabri, which is 85% cotton and 15% alpaca. I was really looking forward to this yarn. I got this yarn in Montreal, I think 3 years ago now, and it was just always in stash, and I was trying to find a project that I would really like with this because I had around 800 meters. So not enough for a full-length sweater per se, but a lot for a tank. So I was trying to find a project that I would really like with that yarn, and I chose to knit a third Cumulus tee. So I have my first Cumulus tee that I ever knit, which was short sleeve. Then I knit my second one, which was 3/4 length sleeve, and then this one I wanted to knit full length. So I knit the size extra small also on 3mm needles, and I just weighed my yarn so I could get the sleeves to be full length. So I knit the raglan, and then when I knit a little bit of the body, I then switched to the sleeves, and I worked a gradual decrease here. So I was increasing at a more frequent rate as I was working towards the end of the sleeve. All of those are in my Ravelry notes, but I did that because I wanted a more fitted sleeve, and I wanted to really get as much length out of the 800 meters that I had. And I should try on this Cumulus tee as I'm talking about it, so one sec. So this is the tee here, or I guess I should say long sleeve t-shirt. It's quite cropped, I would say. I'm wearing it with pretty high-waisted jeans, and it ends right at the top of the jean. Yeah, I would have liked to have knit it a little bit longer, but I ran out of yarn, and I didn't really like the yarn, so if I only need to extend the length a little bit more, I'd have some left over, and I didn't really like it, so I think this is just going to be the length that it is. But wearing it with skirts, it looks really nice, I think, so I'm still happy with the length, even though it's quite cropped. I really like the sleeves as well. They're more of a bracelet length, and I really like how they're more fitted here. So I'm really happy with it. I also really like the fit of this raglan as well. It's more of a wider raglan, I've noticed. So I really like how it looks along the shoulders. It's really comfortable to wear. Yeah, it's a wider raglan here at the front, and then this is the back here. So a very comfortable fit. I just don't really like the yarn. So I think it's because it's a cotton and alpaca blend. I've never really worked with that composition before, but when I blocked this tee, the yarn actually shrunk quite a bit. So the sleeves are even tighter than pre-blocking, and the body got a little bit more cropped as well. Like everything just shrunk in a little bit. And I wasn't too sure why. That's never really happened to me before. I usually have the opposite thing happen when I'm blocking, where the stitches expand and relax a little bit more, but in this case everything tightened a little bit. And I think it's the yarn composition. Someone else commented in my podcast episode where I mentioned this, that it had happened to them with another cotton alpaca blend that they've worked with from another brand. So I think that's just what happens when you use this type of composition. I also find that with this composition, it's a little bit heavy for very hot weather. So it's knit with cotton and alpaca, and I think that it has some nice drape to it, I would say, because of the alpaca, but it's just a little bit too warm, I would say, in the summertime. Even though it is cotton, I think I prefer a cotton merino or even a merino blend more, and I don't find that it gets as warm as this tee here. So not the biggest fan of Illimani Sabri. I do really like the shades and how the yarn feels while knitting it up. It's a pretty nice, enjoyable knitting experience, but I just don't really like how it fits afterwards as a garment. So I don't think I'll use that yarn again for summer garments, but I really like this long sleeve tee. So my next finished object is the Penny tote bag, which is a pattern by Morecaknit. I was part of the test knit group for this design for Kate, and I used Woolfolk Flat Bulky, which was gifted to me for the test knit. And this was my first time working with Woolfolk yarn. This bag here is a bottom up construction tote bag. This is how it looks here. I didn't sew in the lining yet, so it's supposed to have lining in it. I didn't get to that yet. But I think that this design has some really smart features to it to get it to be a well-structured and strong bag. So you first cast on at the bottom here, you work the base of the bag. So you cast on here, so there's a seam here from the cast on, then you work outwards, and then you leave those stitches on hold, and then you do the same thing. And then after that, you pick up stitches on the sides of the base, and then after that, you're just knitting the bag in the round. But there is a side seam here that's achieved with slip stitches on both sides of the bag, and I think that seam just really helps reinforce the bag. It doesn't stretch that much, and I think if you sew in the lining, which I plan to do next year when I finish my Marie pillow as well, and I'll do them at the same time. So I haven't sewed in the fabric yet, but that would also really help with reinforcing the bag. And then you then split for the two straps of the bag, or I guess the one strap of the bag, but the two sides of the strap. You continue working that slip slip stitch seam there, and then you do a 3 needle bind off for the top, so that also creates a really thick seam there that's very strong. So this is the bag here. I actually use it as a project bag because it's big enough to fit even a sweater's quantity amount of yarn and the project. So I find that I use it as a project bag more than I wear it out because I haven't sewed in the fabric lining yet. I really liked the pattern. It was a very quick test knit. It was around 2 weeks, and I kind of struggled with the way that the double moss stitch instructions were written in the pattern. I know that the other test knitters didn't really have a problem with that, so it might have just been like a personal issue I had with interpreting the instructions, but I found that it was kind of hard to understand how to work the double moss stitch at points of the pattern. But apart from the double moss stitch constructions, which I found a little bit confusing, I thought that the pattern was really well written. It's very concise and very easy to follow. So overall, happy with the finished object, and I do really like Woolfolk Flat Bulky. So that is a really unique boucle yarn. I usually don't like working with boucle because I find that it's really difficult to knit with. My needle always gets caught into the loops of the boucle, but I think that this finished fabric is really nice for smaller accessories. So I don't think I'd ever knit a garment out of boucle, but things like this I really like. Woolfolk Flat Bulky is a 2-ply boucle, so it's 100% merino. And there is a really thin single ply strand of merino that forms, I guess, the core or the base of the yarn. And then there's loose merino fiber, or like, maybe not loose is not the right word, but like unspun merino fiber that's then plied around that single ply merino. And it creates this really thick and plush boucle. This bag I knit up with 1 strand of boucle on 3.5mm needles. And it's a really thick fabric, so I really like this yarn, and I would use it in the future for smaller accessories like the teddy clutch or the typical pouch I was looking at. So I'd really like it for a bag in the future because I think, in addition to this bag, I guess, because I think that it has a really nice finished fabric. It is a little bit more pricey though, so it's around $40 a skein, and there is 18 meters. I will correct myself if I'm wrong, but it's a bulky weight, so 118 meters for every skein, and it's $40 a skein. So that's more than I would usually spend on a skein of yarn for myself. This yarn was gifted, as I mentioned, but I would buy it for smaller accessories like that because you get a really unique finished fabric with the boucle. I've used boucle yarn in the past, and I've held it double and even triple. I don't think I would get the same finished fabric. So I would be excited to try some other Woolfolk yarn in the future. It is a little bit pricey though, so I'd need to budget for that. But I do think that this boucle is really great for these smaller, sturdier accessories. And then after that tote bag, I was in full ornament knitting mode for the Christmas markets that I was a vendor at. So I will touch upon all of these patterns a little bit, but these are the ones that I have left. I ended up selling a lot of them at the market, so that was great. I think that was the first time where I realized how attached that I can get to some pieces, because it was great that I was able to sell some, but then some of them I was really sad to let go of because I don't have that many left for my own personal tree. But I had a lot of fun knitting all of these ornaments. Most of these are free patterns. I've made a few modifications to most of them, so I have detailed those modifications on my Ravelry if you ever want to knit these ornaments, but I will share a few of them right now. So the first one here were these little sweaters that I knit. This is a pattern from the Wandering Flock. It's the mini crop puff. I knit this with a strand of fingering and mohair yarn on 3mm needles, and I modified also the increase rates of the raglan, or the number of increases in the raglan, so I could get the stripe placement to work out how I wanted. So this is the front here, and then the back has a little bit of a join. I haven't really been able to figure out how to get a more seamless join for the one stripe of color work, so if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them down below. So not the neatest work, but I find that since this is the way that you hang the ornament, you don't notice it as much, and it's maybe only something that us as a knitter would notice. The join is not the most even. So I have these ones left, blue and red one. This one's a little bit more subtle, the gray and white, gray and red, and then this one is my personal favorite, this purple and chartreuse. So those ones were really fun. The next one that I knit a ton of, and that was definitely the most popular one at the markets, were these toadstools. This is the Christmas toadstool pattern by Maren Curley. I knit these on 3.5mm needles, and I also did some modifications so the toadstool is a little bit more plump and a little bit larger than the pattern. So again, notes on my Ravelry. This pattern was super popular. I think everyone loves toadstools, and they're pretty fun to knit up. They're pretty relaxing to knit up. I can maybe make one in about an hour and a half. So I would say that it's some really nice TV knitting in the evening if you want to knit up a few of these. I'm thinking of knitting a few more in this yarn here. I used Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo, and I think I might make a little garland, maybe across this bookshelf here or out in my living room, because I really like how they look with the color changes. But I knit a few of these here, and then I have a few more natural looking ones. So I have this one here knit with some alpaca that I got from the CNE, from this local farm here in Ontario. And then I have this one here where I embroidered some cluster seed beads. So there's that. I also have this little cottage, a pattern by Agatutag. Knit this one to pattern, didn't make very many modifications, and I embroidered a Dora on the front, in the middle. This one is also really simple to knit, and I think it looks really cute as a set with the toadstools. So I knit that. And then I knit these rainbows here, which I love. They're so fun to knit up because you only need the tiniest little bit of scraps. And you can do any color combination that you like. So this is the rainbow pattern by Amanda Berry. There's two different rainbow patterns that Amanda Berry offers. I knit the one where there are, I guess it's the more rounded shape rainbow. And I made some modifications so I was able to knit this in the round. So there was less to seam at the end. So this little maroon one, this is like a more retro one, I would say. And then this one was a more fun pop of color. That one, those were really fun to knit up. And then this is the last one where I followed a pattern. This is the only one that I have left, so definitely need to make a few more next year. And this is the Tiny Little Donut by Julie Williams. I made a few modifications to this so it would be a larger size. So I knit this on 3.5mm needles. The way that you work this donut is there's two different colors. So there's the top part of the donut, the frosting, and then there's the bread, the dough part of the donut here, and you work the bottom part here with increases and then the top part here with decreases. So I just worked more increases and decreases to get a larger shape as well, and I modified this so I could knit this in the round on DPNs. And then afterwards you seam the donuts together with a Kitchener stitch along the sides here. And as you're doing that, you stuff the donut, and then I added these little tube beads to create little sprinkles. I love how this looks, especially under the light of a Christmas tree. It's really fun. And yeah, one of my favorites. The next food theme one that's self-drafted is this Pop-Tart here. Self-drafted this. It's a very simple pattern, you could say. It's just a stockinette tube on 4mm needles that I then stuff and then seam the top with Kitchener stitch and then graft the bottom with a Kitchener stitch as well. And then I sew on this felt that has the tube beads as well. So this one is really fun. And then the next two are also self-drafted, and I had a lot of fun doing some variations of these hats. So I have a free pattern on my Instagram and also on my Ravelry. This is the 2 pom-pom version, and this is the 1 pom-pom version. Really fun to be able to use up some of my hand-dyed yarn for the pom-poms, and it was just a really nice way to experiment with color, and these were a really great hit as well at the markets. And then the last one is this self-drafted stocking. I think I took the Tiny Tree Socks by Summer Lee Knits, and then I just knit these on 3.5mm needles and kind of played around with the stitch count a little bit to create this little stocking. So I have a few here. This one I used the hand-dyed yarn that Bree of Bree Knits got for me from Knit City. And then I also embroidered some little beads on it to just add a little bit more sparkle. It needed a little bit more, so I added some sparkles to that one. This one I also used a speckled yarn from Knit Picks. I embroidered some beads on it too, but I feel like you can't really tell. And then this last one I used Drops Air, and I embroidered some more tube beads to make it look like a little cookie. So those were all of the ornaments that I have left and that I have on my own tree. I had a ton of fun knitting all of those ornaments. They're just a really great way for me to use up some more of my scrap yarn, to experiment with color. They're just super bright, they're super fun, and that's exactly how I like my Christmas tree to look. I really like a very playful, kind of kitschy looking tree, so being able to experiment with color was really fun. So those were all of the ornaments, and then the last finished object of this year was a garment, and it is this one here, an extremely cropped sweater. It is the Barco Bolero by Sofie Sorrnsen. This Bolero I cast on in late summer, and it just took me a really long time to finish because I was so preoccupied with all of those ornaments, and I just kind of lost some motivation to knit this Bolero because I had to make a few modifications to the sleeves here, and I didn't really write them down very well. So I just didn't have a lot of motivation to finish this, but I really wanted a last finished object in 2024 that was a garment, because it had been, I think, over 2 months since I had a garment finished object, which is a really long time for me, because I primarily knit garments. So I really wanted to end the year with a garment, and this was the easiest one that I could finish because it is a cropped Bolero. So I'll try it on now. So this is the Bolero here. Hopefully the lighting is okay. It's late afternoon, the sun is going down, so I am almost finished. I'm trying to wrap up pretty quickly, but this is the Bolero. I used Loops and Threads Cozy Wool Merino in the shade black, and I knit the size extra small for the body here, but the pickup ratio for the extra small was a little bit odd. It was almost like a 1 out of every 2 stitches, and I was just worried how that would look, so I ended up picking up the number of stitches for a size medium, so more stitches here, and it just created a little bit of a looser sleeve. There is kind of like a slight bell shape to the sleeve, and that is achieved with changing the needle size. So I knit the body here with 4mm needles, but then as you're increasing for the sleeve here, you just change the needle size. So this is 4mm needles, this right here is 4.5, and then you end with 5mm needles. And I'm not the biggest fan of that design choice, I would say. I feel like in the black it's okay because I don't really notice the individual stitches that much. But if I knit this Bolero in another color, I think I wouldn't really like how the stitch size and the gauge is changing as the sleeve, as you go down the sleeve here. I would have preferred if it was all knit with 4mm needles but worked with increases. So don't really like that design choice that much, but I think that the Bolero looks really cool. The body of the Bolero here is shaped with short rows. That's how you get this curved hem here. And then I cast off in an I-cord cast off here. I think it's just a knit cast off in pattern, but I was worried that it would flare out a little bit and I wanted it to be more fitted and cinched. So I did an I-cord bind off here, and it's still very comfortable, and it's not going to stretch out too much. So this is the front, and then this is the back of the Bolero. It's the same thing as the Blouse #1 Light, where it's a high kind of boat neck, but achieved in a very different way. It's not saddle shoulder, it's just 2 pieces that you then have to Kitchener stitch the top together before you then pick up for the sleeves. And I really like this Bolero. I never thought that I would knit a Bolero before, but they're quite trendy this year, and I do really like how it looks. I don't know if I'm gonna wear it out like this yet. Yeah, I don't really know how I like it with the white tank, but I do really like it with a black shirt underneath. I just think it's a little bit more toned down a little bit, but I am really happy with this piece. I think it's a really cool piece, and I like how I was able to knit my own pretty trendy piece of this year. So this was my last finished object, and that was everything for my Everything I Knit in 2024 video. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much if you reached this point in the video. I'd say I didn't make as many garments this year as I have in years past, but all of the garments that I made this year when looking back on it were a lot of textured knits, a lot of statement pieces. So I'm really happy that I am kind of branching out and trying out new silhouettes, different pieces than just a basic stockinette sweater, though I do love my stockinette sweaters, but really fun to be able to experiment with statement pieces like this. So yeah, that was everything that I knit. Let me know down below what your favorite make was from this year. I'd love to know, to get some inspiration going into 2025. And so until my next video, happy knitting.